Nick Whalen here from RotoWire. It's time for 5 bold predictions for, fittingly, week 5 of the NFL season. Number 1, Derrick Henry of the Baltimore Ravens runs for over 150 yards on the Cincinnati Bengals. Look, I don't know who wins this game. Nothing would really surprise me. Divisional game between two really good offenses. But what I do know is that Cincinnati's run defense is still a major problem. The pass defense, that's a concern as well. But the run defense is the crux of the issue right now for Cincinnati. Cincy ranks bottom 5 in rush defense EPA. They gave up almost 6 yards per carry to Chuba Hubbard and Miles Sanders last week. They're dealing with injuries to both of their interior defensive tackles. Trey Hendrickson also got banged up in week 4. This has been one of the worst tackling teams in the NFL so far, according to PFF. Meanwhile, the Ravens, they come in as the number 1 rush offense in the NFL. They're tops in EPA, tops in yards per game, tops in yards per attempt by a mile. 220 rushing yards per game so far for the Baltimore Ravens. They've rushed for almost 200 more yards than any other team through 4 games. Obviously, Lamar Jackson, yeah, he accounts for a good chunk of that, but Derrick Henry's delivered as the engine of this ground game and is the true RB1 that Baltimore really hasn't had for the better part of the last decade. Henry fell 1 yard short of a 200-yard game last week against Buffalo. We're not going quite that high. We got to keep it within reason, but I'll say he goes for well over 150 this week. It opens up a nice lead as the NFL's leading rusher. Next on the list, this one's kind of a downer. I want to warn you, Pats Dolphins is our first no touchdown game of the season. It's not what we want to see from a fantasy perspective. I'd like to take a moment of silence if you are a Devon Achane or Tyreek Hill or Jalen Waddle fantasy owner. All right, there we go. Thank you. But what we have here are two of the worst offenses in the NFL. Miami is the worst by a lot of metrics. These teams are 32nd and 31st in total points scored. Thus far, they've combined for 6 total touchdowns through 8 games. The Dolphins have more interceptions than they have passing touchdowns on the season. They've only made 9 trips to the red zone all season long. And look, a lot of these issues began even before Tua Tagovailoa got hurt. Dealing with a small sample size. They're basically a game and a half, but it's not like Miami came out all gangbusters against Jacksonville in week 1. They struggled, fell down early against Buffalo before Tua got hurt. And Skylar Thompson, Tyler Huntley, they haven't been able to provide any sort of spark. I thought we might see a little bit more with Tyler Huntley, right? I had a couple of weeks to prepare with Mike McDaniel, sat and watched in week 3. A little disappointed in Mike McDaniel for not finding ways to scheme up anything. You still have plenty of skill position talent. You still have a ton of speed on this roster, especially in light of what we've seen Matt LaFleur do with Malik Willis in Green Bay. I thought we might see a little bit more out of that from McDaniel, but this Dolphins team has just been completely lifeless. And on the New England side, yeah, they put up a touchdown last week against San Francisco, but that came after a fumbled kickoff to begin the second half. They were set up at like the 20-yard line. Maybe we get a break like that this week. It's very possible. We do have 2 mistake-prone teams. Total in this game is 35.5. I'm not sure that's low enough, honestly. I think this is our first no touchdown game of the season, something that did not happen last year until week 13. Did a little research, opened up the books. Historically, it only happens about 2 or 3 times per year on average. Patriots, Dolphins, no touchdown this week. Before we get to our next prediction, please give this video a like if you're enjoying it, and make sure you're subscribed, of course, to the RotoWire YouTube channel. We're going to continue bringing you a ton of content each week through the rest of the NFL season. All right, back to the list. Justin Fields puts up another top 5 quarterback fantasy week this week against Dallas. We loved Justin Fields last week against Indy. That was one of our bold predictions. I think he's in another great spot this week against Dallas. We're running it back. Justin Fields, top 5 quarterback. No DeMarcus Lawrence, no Micah Parsons this week for Dallas. It's a defense that, even with those guys in the lineup, has struggled this season. 24th in defensive EPA, 26th against the rush. They're giving up almost 150 yards per game, 4.6 yards per carry. It's not the Dallas defense of old. Pittsburgh, yeah, they're a little banged up on the offensive line right now. Struggled to get the running backs going last week against Indy. In real life, as far as the result of this game goes, that's a concern for Pittsburgh, but I think it could mean more dependency on Justin Fields, more designed runs, getting Justin Fields out of the pocket. He was able to get loose for 55 rushing yards and 2 touchdowns last week against the Colts. He also threw for well over 300 yards, one of the best passing games of Fields' career. I'm not sure we can depend on that level of passing yardage and efficiency. Again, that's just not who Justin Fields has been throughout his career, but this is another good matchup for Pittsburgh. Cowboys struggled against a mobile quarterback in Lamar Jackson in week 3. The Giants were able to control the ball, control possession for much of the night in week 4. Dallas has especially struggled, by the way, in the red zone. They've given up 9 touchdowns on 12 red zone trips to opponents. If I have Justin Fields on my fantasy roster, I am absolutely starting him with confidence, and I'm expecting another big week. All right, next up, Travis Kelce puts up 25 plus fantasy points for the first time since week 7 of last season. Now, we did see Kelce start to come alive last week against the Chargers. 9 targets, 7 catches, 89 yards, almost a 30% target share on what was a pretty low volume day for Patrick Mahomes. So maybe this is starting already, but I think the Chiefs have no choice here. Travis Kelce has to be a much bigger part of the offense going forward, at least until Rashee Rice is back. We'll see. You know, there's some rumors out there that maybe he didn't suffer a torn ACL. Either way, he's going to miss significant time. Until the Chiefs get him back or they trade for a capable replacement, Travis Kelce is going to take on a larger role. And I say that with all due respect to Justin Watson and Juju Smith-Schuster, but that's not going to get it done. I don't know that the plan was necessarily to heavily feature Travis Kelce during the regular season. You could kind of see there being a little bit of load management on the fly being done by Kansas City. But if the Chiefs want to keep winning games, he's suddenly back to being one of their biggest weapons. Rashee Rice was commanding about 10 targets per game early on. Suddenly, all those are available. I think at least a handful of those have to trickle down to Travis Kelce. And the Chiefs are still struggling to consistently generate chunk play. They're 4-0 so far, but it looks a lot like the 2023 Chiefs. A lot of dink and dunk, a lot of quick passes. I think that should continue to benefit Travis Kelce. He's not exactly a field stretcher at this point in his career. Looking at the matchup in week 5, the Chiefs are home for the New Orleans Saints. Virtually every defense has been effective against tight ends so far this season, so we didn't find a whole lot there, but the Saints do rank 31st in yards per target allowed to tight ends through the first 4 weeks. Saints have been a solid rush defense so far. Not sure Kansas City is going to be able to just hand it off to Kareem Hunt and Samaje Perine and call it a day. Kelce's going to have to be involved. I think this ends up being kind of a throwback Mahomes-Kelce game at Arrowhead. Travis Kelce, 25 plus fantasy points in PPR for the first time in nearly a calendar year. All right, our 5th and final bold prediction for week 5, the Minnesota Vikings. They go to London, they blow out the Jets. Sam Darnold becomes a legitimate top 3 MVP candidate. All right, so this is more of a game prediction than anything fantasy related, but I am all in on this Minnesota team. I've seen enough. You know, after week 1 against the Giants, you're like, all right, it's Daniel Jones. I think a lot of teams could have done this. But now 3 straight wins over 3 really high-level opponents, San Francisco, Houston, and the Green Bay Packers. Those are 3 of the toughest teams on their entire schedule. Scheduled the rest of the way for Minnesota, pretty friendly. Now you head to London, neutral site game. I think Minnesota should honestly be favored by more than 2.5 here. Yeah, the Jets have Rodgers. They have some name value, but this has not been a consistent team on either side of the ball so far. Things look difficult for the New York Jets, especially on offense. They're struggling to get Breece Hall going. He had a disaster week in week 4. Garrett Wilson has not really taken the step forward that we thought he would with Aaron Rodgers so far. And meanwhile, Sam Darnold has looked like a top 5 quarterback in the NFL. Justin Jefferson is still the best receiver in the NFL. I think just having that safety blanket in Justin Jefferson elevates Sam Darnold to a level that maybe we didn't expect. And we saw what Jordan Addison brings to this offense as well last week against Green Bay, having him back in the mix. The Vikings defense still number 1 in the NFL by a mile in terms of DVOA. Even after allowing Green Bay to rally back and put up 29 points after they fell behind 28-0, I think Brian Flores gets after Aaron Rodgers. I think he forces the Jets into long third downs, and the Vikings keep this thing rolling. I like the spot for Aaron Jones quite a bit as well. Jets rush defense, it's been a disappointment so far, essentially when they're playing anybody that's not the New England Patriots. Jones this season has 9 carries inside the 10-yard line. He has 6 carries inside the 5. Only one of those has gone for a touchdown. He's due for some progression there. We'll say the Vikings win this game by multiple scores. We get plenty of shots of a sultry Aaron Rodgers looking disgusted on the sideline. And maybe, just maybe, this is the final straw that pushes the Jets to trade for Devontae Adams.